Bonjour. Hello. This is I Go Travel with Don Barnett. We are going to go on an easy, pleasant rails to trail ride today. The first part of the railroad bed, the trail, is known as the Isadore Canyon Trail, as it runs along a wooded canyon for a short ways, and is named after Chief Isadore, a historic chief of the local Tunaka First Nation people. Let's ride the Cranbrook to Wardner Rail Trail. It's part of the official Tran Canada Trail, hard-packed dirt and gravel. It's a beautiful straight ride. Early part is called the Isadore Trail because it goes through Isadore Canyon. But there are no trains now, so let's switch to a little music as we ride this trail eastward out of Cranbrook. We are going to ride the rail trail between Cranbrook and the small town of Wardner, which is near the Blue Kootenai River here. That's about a 40 kilometer distance along Highway 3 on the White Line. Now, when we ride the rail trail in black, it's parallel to Highway 3, basically, and we're going to ride it right out to Wardner and back. Now, there's one section of the trail where, because of mudslides and reconstruction of Highway 3, they had to leave the rail trail, the railway line, and do a loop off of the railway line and back onto it again. This loop is very scenic, picturesque, and unique. And we are going to make a second video just on that special section. But in this video, we will stay on the rail trail, leaving Cranbrook and taking it basically out to the town of Wardner. Now, why is this part of the railway abandoned? Well, at one time, it came from Fernie and Alberta, the Canadian Pacific Railway, and it went straight across. There was a bridge across the river here. At one time, it ran straight to Cranbrook and places to the west. However, the Americans built a dam across the Kootenai River, and that created a tremendous amount of backwater and flooding upstream. And this whole area was filled with water, and the railway had to change their line. So the railway came from the east as far as the river, and they couldn't cross the river anymore because of the flooding. They turned north, and they went upstream on the river as far as a community, the historic town today, Fort Steele, which is very close to Cranbrook. And the railway continues on from Fort Steele north up to the area of the Trans Canada Highway and Rogers Pass. And there's a junction here at Fort Steele. The other line connects and goes westward over to Cranbrook. But that is why this section of railway was abandoned, because of the flooding. And it just made an abandoned railway ideal for an excellent rail trail. Let's go try and find the trailhead. We're on the east side of Cranbrook. The yellow line is Highway 3 that goes on to Fernie or northward to Kimberley. We're going back to the first traffic light on the east side of town. It's very close to the Tourist Information Bureau, and from that traffic light, if you follow the highway about the distance of a couple of blocks only, There's a sign there that says Regency RV Park. That's a marker. If you can turn off that road just very briefly and make a quick left-hand turn, the road angles parallel to the highway. A marking place is Sander Rental, a large construction rental company. You kind of go past it, and the road goes down along a forestry compound where they house the equipment for forest fighting. And at that point, we're onto a gravel road just in this last little few meters before you enter the parking lot. This is the entrance to the rail trail. Today it is hard to realize the number of railway ties that were cut from nearby forests that were needed to build a railway line across the country. Look at the height of this pile of ties, but all the railway ties are long gone, making it a nice, pleasant bike ride. Ranchers have contracts to graze their cattle, and you'll see fencing like this along the way. Also long gone are the old steam engines that rumbled down this line. Old water towers like this one at the Cranbrook Railway Museum stored water that was converted to steam that powered the early steam engines. Here is one of the old steam engines making a stop at the old Cranbrook railway station. You can ride on a train like the old steam locomotives that once ran on this track. And you can do that at the Fort Steele historic town that is near Cranbrook. This old vintage steam locomotives is coming into the station at Fort Steele, and it's a real tourist attraction. But there are no trains on the track today, just bicycles. We've run into a tricky place here. You can usually either walk or ride over these cattle gates that you run across once in a while. That young fella better catch up with this fast-moving crew. Oh, not long, and he's in the lead. Young legs move fast. In the time past, this was a popular tourist train route. Canadian Pacific offered a luxury circular tour, a train tour that started in Calgary, Alberta. Here was the circular route. Starting in the lower left of the circle tour, let's start near Fort Steele and Cranbrook. The train then went north to Invermere and Golden, then followed east through Banff and Calgary, the origin. And then, starting in Calgary, the train went south to Lethbridge, then west through the Crow's Nest Pass and Cranbrook. This line we're riding the bikes on today was also part of a longer tour route from Sault Ste. Marie on the Great Lakes to Spokane, Washington. Today, you can tour the old railway luxury train cars at the Railway Museum in Cranbrook. This is near the entrance to the Railway Museum. In the meantime, let's keep riding the old railway bed. There's a lot of history here. We ate lunch at a picnic table along the trail at some old historic stone ovens that had been built by Chinese workers back when the railway was built here. Chinese workers were the basic labor force that built the original railroads across Canada. Let's take a quick look at the history of Chinese workers in Canada for about a 100-year period between 1850 and 1950. We'll look at it in just three quick parts here. The Gold Rush era in British Columbia, the era when they then built railroads, and what happened after the railroad building era in terms of Chinese immigrants. But going back to the first era, when the early gold rushes occurred along the Fraser River, the Wild Horse Gold Rush near Cranbrook, and the Caribou Gold Rush in the more northern part of BC, the Chinese people were welcomed as laborers to work the mines. However, the mines eventually petered out. The gold declined. And therefore, we Canadians did not want Chinese immigrants around anymore. So legislation was punitive. The Chinese people could not vote in BC elections. They could not work on public projects in the province. And Chinese immigrants had to pay a tax to even work in the province. However, times changed, and now there was a need to build railways, and there was a need for labor. We now needed Chinese workers. So they were brought in, a few from the United States, but many, many more from China entered Canada during the railway building era. And but they were not treated that fairly. Just look at the comparison between white workers and Chinese workers on the railroad. How much per day were they paid? Whites were paid $1.50 to $2 a day. Chinese workers doing the same work were paid only $1 a day. In terms of accommodations, all accommodations were supplied to the whites. In other words, the white workers slept in railway cars or in buildings along the line. Chinese workers had to pay for their own accommodations and look after them, which meant that they slept in either tents or just out on the ground. Now, when the railroads were built, there was no great need for Chinese labor. So again, punitive measures came in the post-railroad era. Chinese people who wanted to immigrate to Canada had to pay a head tax. And this was hardly encouraging. And eventually there was a federal exclusion tax that ran for about 24 years between 1923 and 1947, and it effectively stopped all Chinese immigration. Now, things have changed from the days when, for example, in the 1880s, BC's first trade union stated that it would take all legitimate means to expel all Chinese from Canada and intimidate those who employed them. Like this old Chinese oven wall, all is not perfect today. We know that. Since 1950, however, Canada has moved toward less discrimination and greater equality toward all ethnic groups, including Canadians of Chinese descent. Canada is sensitive to officially and continually combating all prejudice and discrimination in the workplace throughout modern Canadian society. Like I said, we're not perfect, but we're on the right road, so let's enjoy the ride. It's always nice to stop and take a break and have a quick talk every once in a while. But riding here wasn't always so pleasant and safe. Over the years, there were a few wrecks, and in winter, there was always plenty of snow to shovel. But it's all different today, so let's enjoy the ride. Near Wardner, the rail line had to be built in the highway right-of-way because the landowner, a foreign resident, claimed ownership of the rail bed based on his ownership of land on both sides of the rail line. Canada has no clear policy or law on such matters. In contrast, American federal law says that a rail line reverts to the federal government as soon as the rails are pulled up. Lack of similar clarity in Canada has resulted in considerable confusion, conflict, and delay in rails to trails progress. This is the trail leading into the very small community of Wardner. Wardner has no real restaurants or eating places available. This is the trail that leads on the south end out to the river, the abandoned railway line. You can see it here. So we had nothing else to do but turn around and start our ride back home. Once the trail got back close to the highway, we knew that we were not far from getting back into Cranbrook. So let's ride it on out. That was just a nice bike ride. Anytime you get on a rails to trail, it is a good ride, and the one in Cranbrook here is no exception. So until then, we'll see you again down the road. Don't fall off your bicycle. This is I Go Travel with Don Barnett.